It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change your attitude, change your life. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. You're listening to us in your neighborhood from coast to coast and around the world. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Joan Herman, author, speaker, and your host. For 4 years, Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life has been bringing you interviews with some of the most inspirational and influential people in the world. It's our goal to educate and empower you so you can live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. We have another great show for you today. No matter what we do or how hard we try, life presents us with challenges and change. Sometimes we choose the path, and sometimes our path is chosen for us. For some of us, the life we thought we'd have is nothing like the life we live. And when something doesn't go our way, we tend to say that life isn't fair. Today's guest, Ken Druck, knows what it's like to end up on a totally different journey than what he planned. After the death of his daughter Jenna, Ken used that tragedy to discover how our worst pain can present an opportunity for spiritual deepening, renewal, discovery, and yes, even joy. Since founding the Jenna Druck Center in 1996, Ken has become a lifeline for thousands of families who've suffered a loss. Ken's the author of the new book, The Real Rules of Life, Balancing Life's Terms with Your Own. Hey, Ken, thanks so much for joining us today.
So good to be with you, Joan.
Ken, I know that back in 1996, your life took a different turn. It went in a direction that you could have never imagined. Tell us a little bit about what happened, and also tell us about your daughter, Jenna.
You know, Joan, talking about Jenna is one of my favorite things in the world, so thank you so much for asking. Often it's, when we don't talk about, especially when a child has died and we don't talk about that child, it's like the elephant in the room. So thank you so much for asking.
Well, Ken, just to interrupt for a moment, I actually lived through this. I was born 2 years after my brother passed away at the age of 14, and I lived with parents who experienced what you did. And one of the things my mother always taught everyone was to talk about the person. That person lived, that person was a part of your life, and you need to talk about that person. So it's a natural question for me.
Yep, and we have choices as families to try to sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen and bury our head in the sand and to not process our grief, or to process it and transform it into love. That's what grief is. It's the flip side of love. It's love that we feel we've lost. But the opportunity here is to discover it not three-dimensionally, but just to discover it more of in a spiritual realm. And that's what I've done with my daughter, Jenna. Jenna was having the adventure of a lifetime. She was on a study abroad program in India at age 21. She was a remarkable human being, and I don't just say that because I'm her dad, and all dads think that their daughters are remarkable, and they are, each in their own way. But Jenna was truly a leader in her own life and in the community, and literally in the country, and had accomplished amazing things by age 21. And here she was studying abroad in India, calling me from every port that she had landed in on this semester at sea program. And she called me from India saying, "Dad, I can't believe I'm going to be on the Ganges River. We're going to watch the sun coming up, and then we're going to go to the Taj Mahal, the symbol of eternal love. And I can't wait, and it's going to be so amazing." And she was writing in her journal, literally, about her life in the highest way, and the bus crashed, and 4 beautiful young women died in that accident. So I get to go through what most parents consider to be, or most people consider to be, the worst loss. I get the phone call at 10 o'clock at night, and, you can't begin to describe to anybody who hasn't been through a traumatic loss what it's really like. The closest I could come to would be to tell you that every cell in my being turned inside out. And you kind of feel like throwing up, but it's not from your stomach. You're turned inside out, literally, and you don't know it, but the reset button has been pushed on your life.
So, Ken, when you experience something like that, how do you wake up the next day?
You know what? Sometimes you are, there's this extraordinary wisdom that our bodies and minds have called shock and denial. And in the beginning, we are truly in a state of shock. And thank goodness we are, because it modulates the pain. It allows us to wake up, even if in a semi-coma. And the other thing is denial. And I know denial's got a bad rap, and it should if we're using it as our only way of coping or processing grief. But denial helps us survive. Again, we modulate the pain. We pretend, we play games in our mind, because to think about it and to grasp the enormity of what's happened, I'm never going to see her again, I'm not going to get to live out the rest of my life with her, is overwhelming. It's almost too much. Our brains and our nervous systems can't handle the overload of that. So we go into denial, we go into shock, and then, of course, what happens after everyone goes home, there's a memorial service and a celebration of their life, the shock begins to what? Wear off, and reality begins to set in. And that's when that is the most difficult time, that acute grief, and that's also when we need other people the most.
And our natural response at this point, I would imagine, would be to shut ourselves off and to close our heart, because we never want to go through that type of pain again. And you say that it's important for us to keep an open heart. So when we're naturally wanting to self-protect, how do we keep that open heart so we don't shut ourselves off from others?
That's a great question, Joan. Part of it has to do with really, it's one of the real rules of life that we have to deal with things as they really are. Resisting them, fighting them, hiding, denying, repressing, avoiding, running away from, ultimately is an energy drain, and it prolongs our suffering. So for me, it was a matter of just surrendering. It was a matter of saying, you know what, nothing in my toolkit to cope is going to help me deal with this, to put a spin on it, to do a lot of the things that I've done in the past to help me cope. There's no way to cope with this. I'm standing in a moment of choiceless pain, and the best I can do is to surrender and understand that, to literally breathe one breath at a time, because that's as much as I can do right now, and to live to fight another day. And that surrender, strangely and paradoxically enough, is one of the core tools of our survival, because we are in survival mode in the very beginning after that kind of a loss.
Ken, you're talking about surviving in survival mode, but with that comes something that's very harmful to us, and that's survival guilt. We experience that not only with the loss of someone, but it could be with, when you outlive a child, or you outlive a spouse, or you survive a disease that someone else passes away from. So how do we get rid of this survival guilt and move on with our life? And I know you've recently received an email or a letter from someone that shared their survival guilt story. And if you'd like to read that, I'd love for you to do that.
Absolutely. Guilt is such an amazing phenomena. It's one of the only synthetic emotions. It's one we kind of make up as human beings. We're the only ones who can disarm ourselves of guilt. And why do we feel guilty? Because, when we experience an unspeakable kind of loss, whether it's a loss of a life or whether it's a living loss, and a living loss could be, the loss of our health. It could be we have a child who is strung out on drugs, and every time the phone rings, we're terrified. It could be the loss of our family business. It could be a horrific divorce. It could be anything. But what we do, we're scrambling. We're fighting to somehow wrap our minds around it. And what do? It's a natural psychological defense for us to do what? To try to undo what's been done, what's not, what we can undo. And the undo process means that our minds are like computers in search mode, trying to connect the dots and make sense of what doesn't make sense. We're searching everywhere for the rewind button, the time machine, to undo what can't be undone. And part of that is guilt. Guilt is when we replay what happened in our minds and try to have a different outcome. And we enroll ourselves in a place where we would and could have and should have and didn't do something that would have prevented our horrific loss. So the the email that you were talking about is that one I received literally minutes before getting on the radio with you. And I had gotten an email on my website from a mom that I had helped several years ago. Her daughter was killed by a hit-and-run driver, and she had just gone out. She had ordered my book on Amazon.com, and she wrote me, "Ken, reading your book is like having a conversation with you. I'm halfway through it now and find myself following your suggestion of skipping around and using it as a tool. But I realized one thing. I've been hiding from you. I've been hiding from my tragedy. I put it in a bubble because I felt guilty being happy again. Then I see you and I realize that it really did happen. She really is gone. And we really are happy again. Just in our new life, we're happy again. Does any of this make any sense to you, Ken? I'm so sorry for hiding." And she signs it, Love. This is what we do. The core thing, if you were to say, Ken, what's the single most important thing of helping ourselves turn adversity into opportunity in our lives or surviving a horrific loss of any kind, I would say it would be self-compassion. The antidote to guilt is self-compassion.
You've written this book, The Real Rules of Life, Balancing Life's Terms with Your Own, and you talk about life's terms. What do you mean by that?
Joan, we all have these beautiful blueprints, don't we? We have these dreams and visions for what we want our lives to be, for what we want our children's lives to be, our grandchildren. And we write this extraordinary script, and it has health and vitality, beauty and love and connectedness, faith. You know, it has all these beautiful elements. And then what happens inevitably in all of our lives is that life speaks. Life has its own say. You know, we try to make plans, and then life directs us. Life chooses, some path of life chooses us. And it could be a wonderful accident. It could be a surprise. It could be a miracle. Not that we have to win the lottery, but, you know, we might turn the corner and meet the person of our dreams completely unexpectedly. And suddenly we're in a life where we have the companion we've always wanted, or the job we've always wanted and envisioned and dreamt of, you know, or a career, or, you know, vibrant health, and suddenly we're feeling more fit and vital than we ever. So it doesn't have to be a tragedy, but life speaks. How can we know? How can we look into the crystal ball and know exactly how life's going to unfold? So life has terms, and some of us make the mistake of unconsciously and unknowingly thinking we have a deal. If I do A, I'll get B and C and D, and I'll just stand. And then what happens? Suddenly, Plan A is over. Plan A doesn't make sense anymore. It wears out, or suddenly it comes to an abrupt ending, and we're at the verge of Plan B. But how we respond, how resilient we are in that moment, how forgiving of ourselves we are in that moment, how patient and kind we are to ourselves in that moment, will determine how we do with Plan B, and it really defines our character.
Ken, it seems like you're saying we have the majority of the people that have this perfect life planned out, the house with the children, the dog, the picket fence, and so forth. And then you have these other people that are so cynical, and they live by the philosophy of no expectations, no disappointments. So how do you find that balance between having it all planned out, knowing what it's going to be, or not expecting anything? Where do we find that middle ground?
Well, that middle ground is really understanding and balancing life's terms with our own. What are our own terms? We want wonderful things to happen, and we should fight for them. We should work hard for them. We should be fiercely determined to make our lives into what we want them to be, to have the relationship that we want and that we deserve. You know, this is our birthright. But we need to do these things with humility. We need to do these things with flexibility, understanding that there are mid-course corrections and adjustments that are part of the program. Instead of acting like victims or being irate or arrogant or blaming God or blaming somebody, you know, we need to understand this is the nature of life. We have to make these adjustments in the course of our lives. So take the risk. Put your heart on the line. Put your life and your efforts on the line. Go for what you want, but do it with an understanding and with a sense of humility that life is going to have its say, and ultimately, we're going to have to balance our terms with life's.
Ken, one of the rules in your book that I found interesting, because I think this is a mistake that many of us make, we hear this term, this word closure, and we think that when we go through something that one day you're going to wake up, you're going to have closure, it's going to be gone, put behind you, never to be dealt with again. And I don't think that's the way it happens. I mean, I'm a believer that it's a lifelong process. You may go along for 2 years doing relatively well. One day, bam, it hits you again, and you need to go through the steps in the process. Is there such a thing as closure, a finality, putting it behind you, or is this something that you deal with for the rest of your life?
No, you're 100% right. Closure is a myth. Not that we don't turn pages and finish chapters in our life. We do. But closure, in the sense that we're talking about it, doesn't exist. We are all a work in progress. And if we've suffered losses and we've gone through traumatic times or periods of childhood or brutal divorces, we're always coming back to rework the next phase. Sometimes it takes gathering strength to be able to deal with the more difficult parts. But if somebody says you should have closure, if somebody says get over it, get on with it, if somebody invokes that ethic, it gives us, what does it give us? A tool to beat ourselves up with, to tell ourselves we're not grieving right. We can't cope, we're weak, we're incompetent, we're a failure. And that is the wrong thing. That's arming us with something, a weapon, rather than arming us with support, understanding, compassion, and strength to understand that these things come cycling through. We live in a society that teaches us that there's a pill for every pain, there's a fix for every problem, there's a diversion for every moment of emptiness, and basically we learn how not to cope. We learn to expect these things. We set our expectations there, and then when these things don't happen, who do we blame? Most often, we blame ourselves. So we have to disarm ourselves of the myths and the illusion that there is such a thing as closure and that something's wrong with us if something bubbles up again in our life.
The book is The Real Rules of Life, Balancing Life's Terms with Your Own. We'll be right back. For Medical Minute, joining me this week is Dr. Michael Gross, the Medical Director of the Active Center for Health and Wellness and the founder of Active Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. Dr. Gross is the author of the new book, Get Well Soon. Welcome, Dr. Gross. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Joan.
Dr. Gross, we hear a lot these days about the importance of hormone replacement. What are the different options available? I mean, I know that when I hear about this, sometimes it makes me very nervous, and I'm not really sure about the risks and what all of this is about. So what are we talking about when we hear hormone replacement therapy?
Well, in women, we're talking about estrogen and progesterone, and in men, we're talking about testosterone. There have been multiple attempts in women, particularly postmenopausal women, to do hormone replacement with synthetic estrogens and progesterone, and that carries a significant set of risks, but it may be medically necessary and it may be worth the risks in some patients. Most of the hormone replacement that's done by anti-aging specialists is done with what's called bioidentical hormones. Those hormones are plant derivatives, and they are identical molecule for molecule with the hormones your own body makes. And so they don't carry some of the same risks that the synthetic hormones do. In fact, they may prevent some of the same diseases that the synthetic hormones may, in fact, cause.
Doctor, why would someone want to take hormones? What are the benefits, and what can happen if you don't go down that road?
Aging is a part of life, and as we get older, our bodies start producing less and less of certain chemicals called hormones. In men, again, that's testosterone, and in women, that's estrogen and progesterone, particularly, of course, after menopause. What we've realized is that those hormones, as they decline, that decline coincides with the development of external fat, of less muscle mass, with a loss of energy, with a decreased libido or sex drive. And so if we can restore youthful levels of those hormones, we can counteract some of those changes of aging. There's a big article in the New York Times about the testosterone study, which is a large multi-centered study that's coming out of Harvard University. And they have found, particularly in men, that there may be not only a problem with testosterone levels dropping as we age, but some of the effects in men may be more related to estrogen levels dropping as well in men, because testosterone in men is converted to estrogen. So this research is ongoing at major institutions, and some very exciting things are going on.
Doctor, in your opinion, what does someone need to know before making this decision?
Well, I think they need to be evaluated by a medical doctor. They need to know if they have risk factors related to diseases that can be developing if you're on hormone replacement. Men with a history of prostate problems, for example, should not be on testosterone replacement. Men with a high PSA should be evaluated first. Women with a history of breast cancer might not want to be on hormone replacement. So those things should be evaluated, and a doctor that knows the risk should do that evaluation. If you think you have the symptoms of low hormones or hormone deficiency, then there are blood tests, urine tests, and saliva tests that can be done by a medical doctor to evaluate you to see if that is a problem. They can also evaluate you thoroughly to see if there's another problem. Not all problems are caused by hormone deficiency. So the importance of a thorough exam by an internist, a family doctor, somebody that can look at your entire person, not just someone who only does hormone replacement, would be, they might look at you with tunnel vision, and that might not be helpful.
If you'd like more information about this topic, you can visit theactivecenter.com. And if you want to learn how to achieve true wellness in your life, you can get a copy of Dr. Gross's book, Get Well Soon, which is available at Amazon.com. Dr. Gross, thank you so much for spending time with us today. This is definitely an important topic. As I said in the beginning, it's something that I think makes a lot of people nervous. They're afraid because they hear so much about the risks involved. So thank you for shedding some light on this topic.
Joan, as always, thank you for having me. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
We'll be right back. We all want to live a happy, productive life, but sometimes we need a little help. Our Coach on Call experts provide strategies to help you cultivate effective life skills. Joining me today is Karen Chow, a leadership trainer, speaker, and author. Welcome, Karen. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Joan. Thanks for having me on this call. I'm very excited to be here.
Karen, the title of this show, Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we understand how powerful positive thoughts are. But then there's that limiting, negative self-talk. Where do self-limiting thoughts come from?
You just hit the nail on the head when you said negative self-talk. You know, I used to think they came from imprints that are left by other people. But in reality, self-limiting thoughts come from years of buildup of negative self-talk. It's always easier to attribute it, to something else other than face your own demons. But the truth is no one tells you anything unless you give them that authority. So that's where I believe it comes from.
What impact do these self-limiting thoughts have on our professional success?
Just as those who achieve success because they don't listen to the noise and the chatter, they listen to the voice inside that guides them through life. And the impact of self-limiting thoughts can tell you falsehoods like you don't deserve it, you don't work hard enough, or, who do you think you are? So if we train our minds to rethink what we think about ourselves and our abilities, I think we start to believe we're undeserving and not good enough. And the more you tell yourself these things, the more you hold yourself back from achieving success, Joan. And you know where this really comes from? I think it stems from fear. We're actually afraid of being successful.
Karen, what tips can you offer to help us shift limiting thoughts to more positive beliefs?
I have got 3 for you today. One would be to change some of your habits that you don't even know are habits, like watching too much television or the wrong kind of television, playing video games, reading smut, and my version of smut is the National Enquirer. Even hanging out with people that you know are the wrong fit for you, whose goals or values don't align with yours or drag you down because they want to keep you at their level. And another tip is don't walk. Run to the nearest library, bookstores, get a bunch of personal growth, professional development books. Help yourself that way. And third is to reframe your thinking by reframing your questions. So the easiest method to go about this is to ask yourself the right questions instead of the wrong ones, like the positive leading ones and not the negative leading ones. So, for example, instead of saying, how much am I going to lose if I don't do A, B, and C, say, how much am I going to benefit if I do A, B, and C?
If you'd like more information about Karen and her work, you can visit her website, KarenChow.com. That's CaryNchow.com. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that this information is for educational purposes only and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, you can visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on the site, listen to past shows on demand, read the digital magazine, take part in the book club, sign up for the mailing list, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.